Hello, I'm Jade, and I thought I would talk today about that feeling when you're sort of like halfway through recovery. And the reason that I'm doing this video today is I've noticed in the comments on my other YouTube videos certain recurring questions coming up, and in my interactions with people who maybe are not quite there with recovery yet, the same sort of things are coming up. And so I want to dedicate this video to the people who've recently been asking me questions about all the topics I'm going to cover today. So I'm going to talk a lot about fear of fear and that feeling of like, oh, I've made really great progress. I'm in no way living in like 24/7 anxiety. I'm not terrified every moment of the day, but I'm still pretty bad and I'm scared to do certain things in case it takes me back to square one. I think this is really interesting to talk about because it leads us back to avoidance. So if you are doing really well because you've been doing exposures and you've been getting better with OCD recovery, and then you start to enjoy that nice feeling you've got of like, oh, I'm feeling good again, I'm feeling joyful again, certain things are nice again, you don't want that to go. You don't want to go back into the OCD suffering. But I think making peace with the fact and realizing that that is only going to take you backwards rather than forwards, because the more that you cling to this wanting joy and wanting everything to be great again, the more you're giving power to OCD to take over again. So for example, I was talking to someone recently about they were watching a series on Netflix, and then something a little bit triggering came up, and what it was doing for them is it was in relation to intimacy, and it was bringing up disturbing, upsetting thoughts for them just because it was intimacy, and they didn't want their brain to sort of come up with things that were distressing to them in line with their theme of OCD. And so they really great news, they did carry on watching the whole series, but they were like not enjoying the fact that it was bringing up all these intrusive thoughts and all this upsetting stuff. So what it sounds like has happened there is that their theme that they're scared of coming back and intimacy in general are becoming connected. And so I suffered a lot with that. So I found intimacy quite difficult with my husband when I was really suffering with OCD, because any time that we would get close to intimacy, it was like I'd be bombarded with all these thoughts. And that was because my brain was saying, don't think about that when that happens, because that's really bad. And that is exactly like the thing of don't think of a pink elephant. What are you going to think of? You're training, you're actively training and teaching your brain, don't do this, which gives it importance. So how did I overcome that? In reality, it's very difficult to stop rumination and intrusive thoughts in a way of like, if you can physically stop a compulsion and force yourself not to, because it can be really difficult to stop rumination. What worked for me was the slow chipping away of the irrational beliefs, so that there was less, I cared less in my brain whether these thoughts popped up or not. So in time, they just started to stack backwards in the importance in my brain. So now, if an intrusive thought did come up, it would be sort of further back and not really visible or noticeable. So when we were talking about the documentary, what I would say in answer to that question is great news that you didn't stop and you didn't avoid watching, but you don't really in reality want to be living your life that way. You don't want it that every single time you watch a TV show and there's intimacy that you're going to feel really upset and uncomfortable. So I would say that working on those irrational beliefs of, why are these thoughts so terrible? Documentaries around the feared scenarios is what helped me. Learning to view the thoughts in the same way a person without OCD would, which takes practice, which is, ugh, I don't want that. That's not a great thought. I didn't enjoy having that. That's weird, but almost shrugged and laughed off. Now, that's the response of someone who doesn't have OCD. Everybody gets these thoughts, but they probably don't even notice them. It's just in the subconscious, in the background. They're not heightened to anything. So it just doesn't latch the same way as it does for us. And so into that fear of fear, I had a couple of questions about that feeling of like, I'm scared that OCD is taking away the happy moments in my life. Again, it's like, don't take away my joy. Let me have a really great meal today. Let me have fun. It's my anniversary or it's my birthday. Please don't ruin it for me. Is like a red flag to a bull, isn't it? Because you're almost welcoming it in, because you're saying, please don't, please don't, please don't, please don't think of a pink elephant, all that stuff. And so what I found really useful with that one is, do you know what? It probably is going to be rubbish on my birthday, because at the moment I get really triggered, not now, but in the past. I'm really triggered at the moment. I've been having a really hard time with my OCD. And so I pretty much expect that tonight is going to be really difficult, but I'm sure there's going to be moments where I have a generally nice time. And this kind of welcoming it in and being like, I don't care if you're there or not, I'm still going to have a generally okay, nice time, is a really great way to sort of show your brain in reality. You can't pretend, because it's you can't lie to yourself, is showing your brain that, you know, I can coexist with you. And long term, I'm working on you being gone, thank you. But for now, you're just going to come with me. I'm not stopping my plans for you. And yeah, I miss the person I was before you came here. But do you know what? That person's gone, and I'm finding out who the new person is. And so, to this person I've been speaking to, I would say to you, try and let go. This is heartbreaking. Try and let go of who you were, okay? Because the new you in the future could be an even cooler version of you. So, at the moment, you're probably struggling a lot with the old version of you that you miss desperately, where OCD wasn't latching as badly as it is. Now, I can't actually relate to that, because I've never been an adult without it, without crippling OCD, other than on this side of it. So I only remember being like 5 or maybe younger, where I wasn't extremely anxious all the time. So I can't actually relate to that feeling from firsthand, but I would imagine it to be devastating. You know, you've had this amazing life and everything's going great, and then bang, it's all taken away. In some ways that could be harder, because you know what life is like before it. So I would say, please try not to cling so hard onto that old reality. Try and make peace with, this is your reality now. For whatever reason, OCD decided to kick in now, and maybe be great. You could even be grateful that it didn't happen 15 years ago, and you'd have 15 years of suffering up to now. So in some ways, could you see it as like a positive in a weird way? Because like I said, I had it for 17 years, severe, intense, before I found out about what OCD was and how to recover. So maybe you could take a little bit of a positive out of it. Not that it feels like there's any positives at the time. So it's really about letting go of the old self. And even things like looking at people who've had life-altering accidents in an instant. Maybe they've been in a car crash and they've lost limbs, or they have lost the use of a part of their brain. You know, there's an incredible story of a woman not far from me who was, she's a very beautiful model and a hairdresser, really good at what she does, really great social circles, married, happy. And she literally went for lunch one day, fell down the stairs, and woke up completely different person, couldn't speak anymore, severe brain damage. And unfortunately, her social circle changes, her marriage ended, her life, she can't work now. Her life is a completely different life. However, 3 years on, she is using her now disability to raise awareness. She talks about how her perspective on everything in life has changed, how she doesn't miss her old circles, because she understands now that if they weren't going to work out when she was at her worst, you know, maybe they were never right in the first place. So, you know, we can really look at people who've suffered and take inspiration from them in how we go about tackling our new life. And as heartbreaking as it can be to let go of the old self, try to picture who you can be on the other side of this. Because for me personally, with everything I've been through with OCD, I am actually really happy with who I am and where I've arrived in my personality, in how I go through the world, in my perspectives. There's not many people I can meet that I don't, you know, have understanding of them and where they're coming from. And if there is like a behavior or a position they have on life, in relation to their belief system, I'm interested in it, I'm curious. And I've got friends who've got very different belief systems than me, and I just enjoy their company. And I think that becoming more rational as people and being open-minded and I like to think of OCD recovery as like doing a marathon. Like I feel like I've done those. I don't know what they're called, but a cousin of mine is doing this like 600 miles over 6 days run or something like that, and he's been training for like 3 years. And so I feel like my brain has been through that, like because it was unwell, and I've had to do so much conditioning and work to get it fit. The outcome of that is that now that my brain is well, it's extremely strong in other ways too, and I really love that about it. I love how flexible my brain is, and it changes all the time. Like my mind is constantly changing. Like a year ago I was convinced that dairy was really not great for me, so I stopped eating it, and then I've actually found out some other research about how dairy is really good for you. And not that I'm like jumping from one extreme to the other, but I'm just interested in all these different perspectives and like different ways of thinking about things. So I hope that you can fall in love with who you could be and who you can end up, and say, like, it's okay, you know, the old me is not necessarily there right now. But the good news is all the great things about you will remain. I think a lot of my time spent worrying was fear of, what if I'm breaking my brain? Like, there's no way that a brain can go through this much trauma and get through it the other side. There's no way that I can sustain this. This is ridiculous. But look, I had extreme heightened anxiety for 17 years, every moment I was awake, and I'm fine now. There are no effects afterwards. It cannot hurt you. Now, I'm not a doctor. I'm sure that there's times when, like, blood pressure or whatever, I don't know, but I'm just saying I'm fine. I'm totally healthy. Apart from having too many takeaways because my children won't sleep at the moment. And what else was I going to talk to you about? So someone asked me about, light bulb moments for me, because Rob's talked a lot about light bulb moments during his journey, and that I've got a few. The first one that I've talked about on here before that I will never forget is when I first heard the beautiful magical words, "Do you think you have OCD?" And obviously at the time I was like, don't be ridiculous, my room is really messy today. And so I went on the journey of learning about what that was. And it was a light bulb moment for me, because it was the first time in the world that I'd spoken to anyone in the world about my intrusive thoughts, and they hadn't sent me to prison, because that's what I thought would happen. So that was a bit of a relief. Now, I know that reassurance is not a good thing, but if you have been a child up until being a 30-year-old and have never ever once been told there is nothing wrong with you, you have an illness, I'm sorry, but that's an important moment, and it was very important to me. And so after that, I definitely did go down a rabbit hole of like Googling all the time and reminding myself I had OCD and telling myself it's just thoughts, leave them alone. And of course that didn't work, because I had severe OCD, chronic, latched, guilty, shameful OCD is how it felt. And so it just didn't cut it. Now, the second light bulb moment for me was in Italy in 2018, when I found the OCD Recovery Instagram page, and I'd been working on recovery for like a year or so, and it was a feeling of like, this is as good as it's going to get now. I'm still really anxious most of the time, but at least I know how it works and what's going on, and I know I can go to my therapist when I need to. And I found the page, and I was just like, oh my gosh, that's me. That's exactly what it is. And it wasn't even from a reassurance point of view. It was just, that's why I'm not better. Wow. And so I went on that journey of learning about unconditional self-acceptance, working on breaking down my fears. And yeah, I went through exactly what you're going through right now. The person I've been talking to, and anyone else this is relevant to, the recovery OCD phase, which is, I should be better by now. I've done so much work. Why is this not working? I feel a little bit better. Maybe it's not going to work. Maybe I'm doing it wrong. Maybe, and this is part of the journey. Okay. I remember being furious with being told this by peers of like, just let your brain do its thing. This is part of the journey. It's all going to come clear. Keep going. Once you see the confusion as part of the journey, you can relax a little bit, because you know, there were 6 months where I did nothing on recovery. There were 6 months where I did insane amounts of exposures and read all the books twice. Well, I haven't actually read all the books twice at all. I do want to reread the books, because now that I'm well, there's so much you can learn from a perspective point of view. But it's all part of the journey. And by the end, it was probably 0 to 3 years of really working at it. So if you're, new into the journey and you're like, well, I've done this, I've done that, and it's not working, just, you have to keep going, and you have to get grit to work out what is it you're scared of and what are you putting off, and are you really going for it. Yes, it's okay to have a week off and like not do anything, but being realistic with ourselves, how many of those week offs are we having, and are we really going for it? Because it's only our life where, I don't want to say wasting, it's not wasting, it's only our life that is essentially impacted by this. Obviously it can be difficult for loved ones, but if we're honest with ourselves about how much work we're putting in and we're comfortable with what we're doing and we know why we're coasting or why we're not moving forward, then at least we can, face up to it and go, well, when I'm ready, I'm going to do X, Y, Z. And I did find having a recovery plan useful. Absolutely, you don't want to be compulsive, but I did have a bit of an action plan of like, these are the key things I'm going to focus on this month. I'm going to do these exposures twice a day for 3 weeks. I'm going to do, I'm not going to say no to anything. Anything that scares me, I am saying yes to without even thinking about it, even if I have to rearrange something else. If it scares me, I'm going. And I'm going to make progress. I'm going to read a chapter of the book every single night. I'm going to reread the ones that are most valuable to me so that I really understand it and it goes in. And I'm going to watch 2 documentaries this month. I'm going to have 2 sessions with one-to-one, and I'm going to do a group coaching call. And I applied this, I really went for it, and I let everything come up and I coexisted with it. And I had the hardest time of my life. And I think that's what stops most people. It gets harder before it gets easier. And that is why, you can understand why, like, it's an exhausting life having severe OCD. And if you're getting to a place where you can survive a bit better and you're not just glued to Netflix and stuck in bed all day, like, obviously you're going to want to enjoy that for a minute. It's a human thing. It's really hard to go, do you know what, I've been suffering chronically for years and now I'm going to make it worse. This is going to be great. And people are not motivated 100% of the time. So we have to get more flexible with ourselves about the journey. Think of it as the same as training for a marathon. Yeah, it's great if you can be on form for 8 months training for a marathon. But at the same time, if you have a couple of weeks where you had a couple of takeaways and you forgot to do the exact amount of exercise you're supposed to do, fine, like, don't berate yourself, don't beat yourself up, just get back on track. And that's how I talk about running a lot because I've always been a runner, and that's how I liken it and having that drive. Any other light bulb moments? Yeah, when I started to thoroughly enjoy raising my children, there were certain moments of clarity where I'd look out the window and the world looked brighter, and I'd think, whoa, this is amazing. Look at the trees, like, wow, there's no, like, the latch is loosening. This is amazing. Like a peace, and little things like being able to have a massage and being able to be alone with my own thoughts and being really happy there. Like, I love spa days now, but I could never, the thought of laying there for an hour without my own thoughts was terrifying. With my own thoughts was terrifying. So those are my main light bulb moments. What other light bulb moments did I have? Just when things like perspective shifts started to happen. The fact there's no such thing as an evil person, that's media sensationalism. There is no such thing as an evil person. There are people who are extremely unwell and carry out very bad acts that need to be in prison in order to rehabilitate and protect society from their actions and behaviours. However, they could one day decide to get the help they need, change, live a relatively normal life. There are people who I imagine are extremely unwell who can never be integrated within society, but seeing them as, yes, it's dangerous to society for that particular person to coexist with others based on something that's genetically wrong in their brain and experiences that have happened to them, you start to see a person have compassion for any human in the world. There is no such thing as, in my opinion, an evil person. It's just a culmination of experiences and genetics that led them to end up a certain way. And so if that happened to be me, well, okay, what could I do? If you imagine being that person, well, you know, they need to be given the opportunity in prison to rehabilitate. It's like they have the therapy, whatever it is, and I want to change, I want to be a good person, whatever that be, and then they work through that, we hope. So it's interesting. Now, the last thing I was going to mention is things like the compulsions of Googling and avoiding certain things. So I was asked about this too. Yeah, Googling is a compulsion you can decide to stop. I know rumination is hard, but you can be honest with yourself. When you turn to Google, it's for that rush of dopamine, it's for that relief that someone else is the same as you. Look, once you've learned that others suffer with OCD the same as you don't need to know about it again, and you don't need someone with exactly the same symptoms as you. I remember the feeling. You convince yourself it's okay, this is normal, my thoughts don't mean that, this other person's the same, she's also a mum, this happened. And then 3 hours later, oh my gosh, yeah, but I thought this. No, that must mean I'm different. That must mean I'm new. Google, Google, Google. There's no easy way. You have to stop. Like, you could spend another 10 years or another year doing this and reaffirming to your brain that this is something to be scared of. And that is what you're doing. Every time you Google, your brain doesn't, you can't hide that from your brain. It's your own brain. You're telling yourself there is a threat here and we need to find a solution to this. So you are actively engaging with OCD and you are strengthening it. So imagine that every time you Google, you are literally feeding your compulsion. And I know, treat it like an addiction. It is an addiction, essentially. It feels you have to do it. You're so upset. But learning to sit with those uncomfortable feelings and going, I am going to sit with this. I'm going to allow this to happen. I'm going to carry on with my day as best I possibly can. I'm not going to sit here waiting for it to calm down. I'm going to carry on doing the things I fear. And this brought me to my knees. That is how hard it is. It brought me to my knees several times. I wouldn't Google. I would do my exposures. I would go to things I was scared of. And I used to say to my husband, I'd be head in hands and I'd be like, I am not going to be able to do this. I'm going to die. And that's what it took for me. I had suffered a very long time. I hope that helps you. And the person that I was talking to about producing this is literally for you. And I've been you. And if it gives you any comfort, you're already further ahead than me, given that I had what you've got for 17 years before I even found out what it was. So for anyone in the same position, I hope this has been useful. Please comment below with any questions as follow-up, because I really like this format of like actually directly answering your questions, and I'll carry on doing it. And just know that you can do this. It takes grit, it takes determination, but you can do it. I've done it. I'm a lot better, doing really well. I'm not running away from fears, I'm not avoiding, and you can do the same. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.